Real life stories with Liam Johnson. Subscribe and leave a like.
Probably the most unhappy childhood is that of an orphan. Perhaps only the unwantedness of a child with living parents can compare to it. Any orphanage resident can tell you what they felt when they realized they had neither a mom nor a dad. Some managed to stand tall, or rather to make it in life, but only some, because it's incredibly difficult to enter life without having a safety net behind you. If you asked Mason about this, he would say that even more important than a safety net is knowing that someone cares about you, that you're loved. Mason became a complete orphan at 6 years old. First, when he turned 4, his dad, a truck driver, got into an accident and died, and by that time his mom was already seriously ill. Mason didn't know what the illness was called, he just knew that mom couldn't always get out of bed to make him breakfast or go to the park with him. And Mason patiently waited for dad to come home. Then mom would immediately become happier, and dad would sit with them on the couch, hugging his wife and son tightly. And when she could, mom always put Mason to bed, reading or telling him a fairy tale. And she would definitely tuck him in, wrapping him in a warm blanket in winter or a sheet in summer, saying so that no stray mosquito would bite him. And Mason wasn't scared in the next room because mom and dad were there. Then dad was gone. And now mom almost never managed to get up every day. The ambulance came to them often. The neighbor called it forgot her name. She would come to mom in the morning and evening, and she called the ambulance. Mom always refused to go to the hospital, saying she had Mason, and who would he be with? But one day they took mom away, and she never came home again. Then strangers came and took Mason to the children's hospital. He said nothing hurt him. They replied that it was necessary. And from the hospital to the orphanage. In the orphanage, Mason didn't fit in. He didn't like anything there and didn't like anyone. They weren't his mom and dad. At first, he was silent when they offended him. Then he realized he had to fight back with fists and words. He could attack first, and he got the nickname or label that he was a rude bully. That's what the adults called him. He was insolent to them too and didn't obey. Why obey them? They weren't mom or dad. Mason ran away from the orphanage several times. They brought him back. Then the orphanage director and the educators and teachers would tell him at length what could happen to him on the street. Mason might have believed them, but he still couldn't stand the orphanage and resigned himself, starting to wait until he could leave this orphanage without a scandal. He thought that afterward he would live as he wanted. At first, it was like that. Either Mason found a group or the group found him. But he started, can't say it delicately, living like a bum with them. Someone in this group had a roof over their head, but only a roof because the apartment was dirty, the furniture wasn't furniture, but remnants. They had to sleep on the floor. But there was always something to drink and snack on. There were fights too. Mason willingly participated in them. There was something from his life with his parents that didn't let him show strength over the week or when it was a pile-on against one. He lived, you could say, half-starved, but he consoled himself that he was a free man. If he had the chance to see himself in the mirror, he would have come to his senses. In 3 years of such a life, he turned into a battered,
Worn-out guy who looked almost 30. Sometimes Mason himself shuddered when he saw his overgrown and broken nails or his reflection in a shop window. Disheveled, clothes torn, shoes winter and summer, boots that were probably older than memory. More than once, after a quarrel, the group would sort of appoint him guilty, and then they would kick Mason out. He had to sleep on the street. At first, he was a bit afraid that they might beat him there or worse. Then he got used to it and could sleep so soundly that he heard nothing. Only fatigue and hunger always stayed with Mason. Sometimes he had dreams, unclear and fragments. In these dreams, there was a clean apartment with normal furniture, and everything in it was familiar. Waking up, Mason would shake his head to drive away this unclear dream because he guessed what apartment it was, remembered who else lived there besides him. And it didn't matter that his parents had died, they had abandoned him alone. They at least guessed that from 6 years old, he was alone and it was their fault. From time to time, Mason started thinking that he needed to change something. But how? And then he got even angrier. Maybe it wasn't anger anymore, but hatred. Do real parents abandon their children no matter the reason? The important thing is they abandon them. If there was someone next to Mason for whom this still young but already given up on himself person mattered, then that someone would see that his potential was still there, hadn't gone anywhere, the potential that could pull Mason out of despair and indifference to his own life. But next to him was only the group of those who had also given up on themselves. About Mason, although he was with them, the foundation or base capable of standing tall and changing life, only Mason didn't think about that. You could say he stopped thinking about himself at all. But often everything can change even when you don't expect changes. One rainy and already cold autumn morning, Mason was sleeping on a distant bench in the park. Even in his sleep, he understood that he was very cold, and pulled his legs up in his torn sneakers and curled into a crooked ball trying to warm up. It didn't work, but he didn't want to wake up either. What made him open his eyes was a child's voice. "Mister, I'll cover you now and you'll warm up." Standing in front of him was a girl about 5 years old holding an umbrella in one hand and a children's vest in the other. And probably Mason felt like he fell somewhere. This affected him so much. The thin, affectionate voice of the little one, and what she threw over him, her vest with colorful ball trim, and something turned over inside. Mason cried. Good thing the kid didn't see the tears flowing down his long, unshaven cheeks. And a young woman, the mother of this girl, was already approaching. She bent down to the girl. Mason thought that now the mom would scold the little one, and he was wrong. The woman said, "That's right, Olivia. The uncle is cold. You're great for helping him." And they left,
leaving this vest with colorful balls for him. Mason suddenly felt that this children's clothing was warming him, and without stopping crying, and good that no one was around anymore, he seemed to be transported back to that life when his mom covered him the same way. Mason had long forgotten how to feel care for himself, and where would care come from? In the orphanage, there were more than 100 orphans. The care there was different, to feed everyone, to teach them to write and read. But he, it turns out, dreamed of a different care and received it that morning in the park from a little girl. And something clicked inside. Mason said to himself that he didn't want to live like this anymore. He didn't know how differently yet, but not like this. He got up, tried to somehow tidy himself up, and realized it was impossible. He ran his hand over his face and felt the matted sideburns and mustache and beard. He didn't even touch his hair. There was definitely a stack of dirty straw on his head. And how to start a new life looking like this? And Mason decided for the last time to go to that apartment shelter from which they had kicked him out a week ago. He was ready to humiliate himself just to be allowed into the bathroom and given a razor and scissors. He already had a plan forming: tidy himself up at least somewhat and look for any job. And he went. They met him with laughter. Mason didn't have time to say anything as they were already dragging him for booze. Standing on the supermarket steps, Mason watched as they counted the money, and then they told him, "Go buy beer with all the money." "I wanted to wash up," he managed to say, but they were already pushing him toward the door. "Come on, move your fins, throats are burning." And they pushed Mason hard so that he fell near the entrance door, almost under the feet of a young man. He didn't have time to catch Mason, but extended his hand and helped him up. Nearby stood the group you better not mess with, laughing their heads off. So for the second time that day, Mason got lucky. First the little girl in her vest, now this person. It turned out he was a policeman. It turned out that not only in movies are there kind policemen, they exist, and fortunately there are many in reality. This one who extended his hand to Mason helped him stand up in two senses and pulled him out of the bottom to which Mason had already sunk. And this policeman placed him in a shelter while he dealt with restoring Mason's documents, which he had long lost. And already with a passport, with a short, neat haircut, equally neat nails, and in non-torn clothes, Mason found a job himself. During this time, Mason met with this policeman several times. He already knew what fate the guy had, who after tidying up started looking his 22 years old. They thought under 40. The policeman believed him. About Mason believed that strangers can be kind, ready to help. Then life scattered them. Each was busy with work. The policeman went to the capital, and Mason worked, you could say, day and night. He bought a small apartment, terrible, not renovated for 100 years, but within his means.
He fixed it up himself. He saved money and opened his own business, a simple business, a small one. He dealt with cleaning parks and squares, flower beds and flower gardens. At first, everything was done manually, and Mason often worked alongside everyone. And over 12 years, his small business strengthened, grew a bit. Cleaning machines and other equipment appeared, The opportunity appeared to help those who, due to circumstances, ended up in the same position as Mason once was. And he often remembered that little girl with the vest that became a lifesaver for him, and the policeman who believed in him. After all, back then Mason had no documents at all, but the policeman still believed. A couple of times Mason went to the police station, wanted to meet the one who helped him, but he no longer served there. The first time they told him nothing. The second time, obviously believing him, they said that their colleague was now in the capital, finishing studies at the police academy, and they themselves were waiting for him. Maybe he'll get assigned to them in the department. They remember and respect him here. But the meeting between Mason and the policeman still happened, although more than 10 years had passed. But they met at a charity evening organized by the owner of the company, sponsor of the city shelter. And the policeman received a personal invitation to this event. He hardly hesitated whether to go or not. Now he was the chief of the police department and believed that the shelter's contingent should know. Most of the guests were from the shelter. The event itself passed without long speeches and moralizing. More time went to presenting gifts. They gave one to everyone. And already at the very end, a young man came out on stage. There was something familiar about him, but if not for the man's own confession, who was the permanent sponsor of the shelter, the policeman, now in a high rank, wouldn't have recognized the one who once fell on the supermarket steps. And this man for the first time told about himself, about who he was, and that a person who has stumbled can rise if he himself wants it, and if nearby there is someone who extends a hand. Here in the hall, there is a person who helped me stand up, helped me rise, and I very much ask him to come up on this stage. And it's not me who should be thanked for the feasible help that the company provides, and will provide to those who need it. I want us all together to thank this person. And the policeman goes up on stage. He has never been so nervous as now. He looks at the hall and understands what needs to be said, and he says, "I believe that among you there are those who will break out of the circle that seems unshakable, and I believe that you will extend a hand to the one for whom it will become, and sometimes this chain of humanity. And we are all people, and indeed, and today Mason has so convincingly demonstrated this. Thank you, Mason."